In November 2022, at the Bowie County Courthouse in New Boston, Texas, a group of people called a jury decided that Taylor Rene Parker should get the death penalty. She was just 29 years old. She was a woman who had never been in trouble with the law before, had never hurt anyone before, and had never had serious mental health problems. But what she did on October 9, 2020 shocked everyone in the state of Texas and made news all across the country. Parker, who used to be known as a small-town photographer, killed her pregnant friend and cut the unborn baby out of her belly. It wasn't because she was angry in that moment. It wasn't something she did without thinking. It was a long, carefully planned crime built on lies. To understand why Parker was put into a prison van and sent to Mountain View Unit in Gatesville, where Texas keeps women who are waiting to be executed, we need to go back to the morning when it all happened. Reagan Simmons-Hancock, 21 years old, was 7.5 months pregnant and getting ready for a doctor's appointment in New Boston, a country town in northeast Texas. Her 3-year-old daughter, Kinley, was home too. It should have been a normal morning. Instead, her mother arrived minutes later and walked into a horrible scene. Reagan had been stabbed more than 100 times. Her head had been hit and broken with a hammer. Her stomach had been cut open. The baby, later named Braxlyn Sage Hancock, was gone. And by the time police figured out what happened, Parker was already running away, driving fast toward the Oklahoma border with the stolen baby in her lap. By the start of 2020, Taylor Rene Parker was already deep into a lie that would change and end lives. After having surgery that removed her uterus, Taylor could no longer have babies. But instead of telling her boyfriend Wade Griffin the truth, she made the lie even bigger. She told him she was pregnant. Then she told her family, then her friends. For the next 10 months, Taylor walked around with a fake baby belly, printed off ultrasound pictures from the internet, and even threw herself a party to celebrate finding out if the baby was a boy or girl in Sims, Texas. Her lies weren't random. Taylor was terrified Wade was going to leave her, and in her mind, the only way to keep him was to give him what he wanted most, a baby. But Taylor wasn't just pretending. She was building towards something. In Facebook messages, she talked about feeling the baby kick. She told friends she was due in October. She posted pictures of nursery items and baby clothes, and the entire time she knew there was no baby. There never would be. That spring, she started planning. She searched for information about how doctors help deliver babies and how they do C-section surgeries. She called and visited pregnancy clinics in Texarkana and Idabel, pretending she was a patient. She even called in a fake bomb threat to a women's clinic to delay an appointment that didn't even exist. On the outside, she was a happy mom-to-be. On the inside, she was studying how to steal a life. Somewhere during those months, Taylor reconnected with Reagan Simmons-Hancock, a young mother she had met once in 2019 while working as a photographer. Reagan had posted about her second pregnancy on Facebook, and Taylor took note. She followed her online and reacted to her baby bump updates. Reagan was 21, trusting, and just weeks away from having her baby. She didn't know she'd been chosen. Reagan texted a friend that morning. She was feeling a little off, tired, maybe anxious, but excited. Her 3-year-old daughter, Kinley, was still sleeping in the back room. Meanwhile, Taylor Rene Parker, 27 years old, was already on the road. She left her home in Sims around 6 a.m., carrying a scalpel, a hammer, a fake hospital badge, and a diaper bag. Her plan was exact. She had told Wade Griffin she was having labor pains and was on her way to St. Michael's Hospital in Texarkana. But that wasn't where she was headed. Instead, she drove 30 miles northeast toward Reagan's home, a house she had visited before, a friend she'd smiled with on Facebook. Reagan let Taylor inside without question. There were no signs that Taylor forced her way in. She likely didn't feel any danger. Maybe they sat down. Maybe they talked. But by 8:30 a.m., everything changed. What happened inside that home was violent and messy. Taylor attacked Reagan with a hammer, hitting her over and over in the head. The doctor who examined Reagan's body would later confirm her skull had been crushed. Then came the knife. Reagan was stabbed over 100 times in the face, neck, chest, stomach, and back. She fought hard. There were deep cuts on her hands. But Reagan was 21, barefoot, pregnant, and overpowered. Taylor then turned to the belly. Using the scalpel, she cut a rough C-section across Reagan's stomach, cutting into the womb and pulling out the baby. Braxlyn Sage was alive when she was taken, but the shock and the lack of medical care left her barely hanging on to life. In the back room, little Kinley woke up to screams. A doctor who studies behavior later confirmed Reagan died fighting, awake almost until the end. By the time Taylor left the house, 2 lives were gone. One silent in a bedroom and one wrapped in a blood-soaked blanket, struggling to breathe. By 9 a.m., Taylor Rene Parker was back behind the wheel of her gray Nissan Altima, speeding out of New Boston with the stolen baby in her lap. Her hands were stained with blood. Her jeans were soaked. Wrapped in a blanket was Reagan Simmons-Hancock, still breathing but barely. Taylor wasn't heading to the nearest hospital. Instead, she took U.S. Highway 82 toward Idabel, then north toward the Oklahoma border, hoping distance would cover the murder. Just before 9:30 a.m., Parker was caught speeding near FM 44 into Idabel by a Texas state trooper, Chad Wynn. When he pulled her over, Taylor jumped out of the car holding the baby, screaming that she had just given birth on the side of the road. She begged for help, saying the baby wasn't breathing. But Trooper Wynn noticed something odd. There was no afterbirth, no umbilical cord still attached, and Parker didn't look like a woman who had just delivered a baby minutes earlier. She was upset but too clean. EMS arrived and rushed both Taylor and the baby to McCurtain Memorial Hospital in Idabel, Oklahoma. There, nurses made the discovery that blew the case wide open. Taylor had no physical signs of childbirth. In fact, doctors confirmed she had no uterus. Her surgery had made pregnancy impossible. And the baby, she was dying from not getting enough oxygen. Paramedics tried everything, but Reagan Sage was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. Back in New Boston around the same time, Reagan's mother, Jessica Brooks, had just pulled into her daughter's driveway. Reagan had missed a scheduled appointment. The front door was unlocked. She walked inside and stopped. Screaming, Jessica called 911. The person on the phone tried to keep her calm, but the words wouldn't stop. "My daughter, she's pregnant. She's dead. Her stomach is cut open. Her baby is gone." Within hours, detectives connected the hospital report in Oklahoma to the crime scene in Texas. The baby Taylor had tried to pass off as hers belonged to the woman she just murdered. By 10:20 a.m., Parker was officially held by Oklahoma police. At first, she stuck to her lie, but investigators were already tracing her steps, collecting camera footage, and matching timestamps. The lie had fallen apart. Now all eyes were on Texas and what justice would look like for the mother and child who never had a chance. Before she became a killer, Taylor Rene Parker was known as a small-town woman from Sims, Texas. Population barely over 600. She was born on March 12, 1993, and raised mostly in Bowie County, not far from where she'd later commit the most shocking crime in recent Texas history. She didn't come from extreme poverty or abuse. Friends say she grew up in a relatively stable environment, but even from a young age, Taylor had a habit of lying. Small things at first, then bigger ones. In high school, she was charming, talkative, but always exaggerating. By her early 20s, she had 2 children from a previous marriage, and by 27, she had lost custody of both. Somewhere between divorce and instability, she began building a different identity online, a fantasy version of her life. She pretended to be a successful real estate agent, told friends she had wealth, and claimed to be expecting a child. None of it was true. In reality, Parker had undergone a full hysterectomy and could no longer have babies. But when she met Wade Griffin, a mechanic from Texarkana, she lied. She told him she could still have children, and not long after she told him she was pregnant. Over time, she showed him fake ultrasound images. 2 years after the murder, on September 12, 2022, the capital murder trial of Taylor Rene Parker began inside the Bowie County courthouse in New Boston, Texas. Security was tight. National media had already picked up the case. The prosecution wasn't just seeking life in prison. They were asking for death, and they came with evidence. Parker faced 2 charges: capital murder of a child and kidnapping resulting in death. Prosecutors laid out a disturbing timeline showing how she faked her pregnancy for nearly 10 months, manipulated multiple people, and ultimately murdered Reagan Simmons-Hancock to steal her unborn baby. They brought in Reagan's mother, Jessica Brooks, as the first witness. She cried on the stand as jurors were shown graphic crime scene photos. "I walked into the house and saw my daughter torn open on the floor. I knew the baby was gone. I knew she was dead." Her voice cracked. The courtroom fell silent. Prosecutors showed Google searches pulled from Parker's phone. In the weeks before the murder, she had looked up how to perform a C-section at home, How to fake pregnancy symptoms. Buying fake ultrasound pictures. Medical experts testified that Reagan had been alive during the cutting based on blood flow and wound depth. One doctor stated, "This was not a clean surgical cut. This was brutal." Another testified that Braxlyn Sage died from a lack of oxygen, not instantly, but slowly after being pulled from the womb. The defense tried to argue mental instability. They claimed Parker suffered from borderline personality disorder, and years of trauma had clouded her reality, but it didn't work. The prosecution reminded the jury that Parker had spent months staging a fake pregnancy, contacting maternity clinics in Texarkana and Idabel, and even lying to her boyfriend's family to get gifts for a child who didn't exist. They also played a phone call Parker made from jail to her mother. She didn't express guilt. She didn't say Reagan's name once. All she said was, "I messed up real bad." The jury watched her closely. Over the course of the trial, Parker remained mostly quiet. No tears, no apology. On October 3, 2022, after just over an hour of thinking about it, the jury found her guilty of capital murder. Now the only question was whether she would live or die. On November 9, 2022, inside a packed courtroom in Bowie County, the same jury that had convicted Taylor Rene Parker returned with their decision. After hearing days of victim impact statements, forensic testimony, and hours of Parker's lies replayed in detail, they chose the maximum punishment allowed by Texas law: death by lethal injection. Judge John Tidwell looked Parker in the eye and said, "You have been found guilty of capital murder. It is therefore the order of this court that you be handed over to the custody of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice and there be held until the state of Texas executes the sentence of death." Parker showed no emotion, but in the gallery, Reagan's family broke down. Her mother, Jessica Brooks, stood up to speak. Her voice was clear and full of grief. "My baby was alive. She felt every single pain. She fought for her babies and you smashed her skull. You ripped her open and took her baby. You deserve to be removed from this earth." Prosecutors called the killing an act of pure evil. They reminded the court that Reagan's 3-year-old daughter had woken up alone to her mother's body in the next room, that Parker had staged an entire pregnancy, and that she had treated life, real life, like something she could just take. Parker was immediately transferred to Mountain View Unit in Gatesville, Texas, where she became the 17th woman on Texas death row. She now lives in solitary confinement, 23 hours a day in a 6-by-10-foot cell, awaiting her execution date. But in Texas, death doesn't come quickly. Inmates often wait 10, 20, even 30 years. Some are granted last-minute stays of execution. Others die of illness or old age before the needle ever touches their arm. As of now, Taylor Rene Parker's execution has not been scheduled, but the sentence is final. No matter how long it takes, the state of Texas will one day carry it out.